what happens to white wine when you age it is really sexy. So there are certain wines out there, grapes out there, like Riesling. When you age Riesling is fantastic for aging. It gets really golden, it gets really nutty, really complex. It's exquisite. But of course, when you age a New Zealand Sauvignon, you're losing everything you want from it. You drink a New Zealand Sauvignon because it's young, it smells of tropical fruit, kiwis, woof, lovely. And if you age that for 2 years, all that fruit, goodbye, it's gone. But people don't know this because why would they?
Philip, welcome to the show.
A pleasure to be here.
There are two ways when approaching art that you can take, which I learned recently in a recording. You have contextualism, which is involving when you arm yourself with as much information, facts, history, context as you can in order to truly understand a piece of art. And then you also have isolationism, which is where you should just enjoy the piece for its own benefit. And you don't need to know all of the backstory, and if you just like it, haven't seen it, then that's enough. When it comes to wine, which approach is best? Is it the contextualism, where you need to arm yourself with the vineyard location and its history, or isolationism, where if it tastes good, then that's good enough?
I'm going to cheap out here and advocate the fifth one. I'm going to advocate the option of using both. You do need, there's a lot of hoo-ha around wine, and obviously the innate snobbery you get from it, as well as a sort of innate conservatism. I mean that by small c, in terms of it's quite restrictive as an industry. But also, ultimately, what I find enjoyable is very distant to what you will find enjoyable, both in life and in wine. One of the things I always found interesting in the wine world, often people that are really into wine are into wines that actually the majority of the British public don't like at all. It's quite, I, for example, love sweet wine, and but the British in particular see it as some sort of cheap, nasty sort of thing. But sweet wine's great. Sugar's great. Everyone loves sugar. But yeah, no, I would say a mix, because you've got to understand. It's a pleasure to understand, as it were, the background of a vineyard, how something is made, and why it tastes the way it does. But equally, when it comes to just enjoyment, it's about what you enjoy, and there's just like I said, everyone's perception of enjoyment is different, and what the wine you might like might be completely different to wine I like. And if you want to have a claret with a Mars bar, go ahead. I will not judge you. I might raise an eye in the corner, but I know it's wine's about enjoyment. Life is for living. Let's not. You often find the people that are the most opinionated often know the least. Wine's there to have fun. But at the end of the day, let's be honest, it's fermented grape juice. That's what it is. But you can obviously espouse that, and there's so much more interesting stuff to that. But at the end of the day, it is fermented grape juice. But there is magic in that juice.
So when discussing wine as a topic in which you have both passion and knowledge about, how did you come to the point where you are now of being an online voice when it comes to wine, and when it comes to certainly discussing all things wine, tasting notes, or advice to people such as I who have absolutely zero knowledge when it comes to wine? Where did it start, and how do we get here?
Where did it all begin, as they like to say? It began, I suppose, out of, like with every sort of good thing in life, by mistake or by coincidence. I was born, I grew up in Sussex, and for anyone that knows anything about God's County, not Yorkshire, God's County is truly Sussex. Everywhere else is inferior. Sussex is home to some of the best English vineyards in the country. And that's because it shares the same chalk pan as Champagne. And if you think about Champagne actually as a sort of longitude and latitude, the south of England and Champagne are remarkably similar in climate, soil, everything. So I grew up there, which meant I was surrounded by English vineyards, which meant when I was, I think, 18, I had my first grape harvest, purely out of financial necessity, nothing to be particularly pious about. I was poor and needed money to fund my beer drinking. However, that did, if you start 18, you get a sort of appreciation for it. And then I went to university, and then when I left university, I started off as you do in a bar job, but that led to wine appreciation, my WSET's qualifications, so on and so forth. Ended up going to Laithwaites for many years, and it just grows from there. I mean, to a large extent. I'm in a sense shitting over my industry here. I hope we can swear, but okay. I'm pouring brown muck on my industry here. But for a large extent, the people that really get involved are, involved in wine, are sort of aspirational waiters. On the whole, I mean, thankfully, I have a bit more of a. I've always had a much more business acumen, which is why I started my own business ages ago, and I've been in the wine trade for ages, and but that's kind of where it started, very much sort of when I was 18, and you get your appreciation and your love for it. I mean, to be brutally honest with you, I probably wasn't really actually into drinking wine in a serious way until I was probably 20. I mean, I enjoyed wine, don't we all? But I would say it takes, and now I'm 32, so now I can actually, I always say I've been in the wine trade for 10 years, but technically if I started when I was 18 picking grapes, I've been in it for 14 years, which is a terribly long time already. And that's kind of where it started. And then I started doing these Instagram videos about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, and that proved to be quite popular and increasing in popularity and all this sort of stuff. I was just trying to make wine accessible, really. Just because I know loads about it, most people don't. Like yourself, you said yourself, you are just a vessel to which to pour wine into, rather than
a humble vessel,
a useful vessel,
So is there a concern, however, with your profession? So if we take other professions, if an athlete continues to train as hard as they can, they will only get fitter. If a banker continues down his chosen avenue, he will only get richer. Surely you, in the profession in which you're in, are in a slow waltz to alcoholism.
You would think that. I'm going to make some more amusing jokes about bankers, but I'm not sure daytime television would permit it. But no, so I actually am not a huge drinker. I don't drink during the week. There is definitely probably quite a lot of covered alcoholism in the industry. To be brutally honest with you, I tend to drink mostly beer, ale in particular. But I drink wine when I love cooking. Dare I say, in another life, my real forte is actually being an excellent cook. And I believe that wine should be paired with good food and vice versa. Often when I have, I decide what I'm cooking, I think, what am I drinking first? And I'll have a very good bottle of wine or two with friends on the weekend. But I won't drink during the week. And when I do I usually have to go to one of these wine tastings every week or two. And there's about 200 wines, and I must admit, it's on those occasions it's quite hard to remain sober. Without being too crude, I do not believe in the spit method on that sort of front. I think it's I think it's like, the thing is, when you're tasting wine, it's about how it also affects your saliva glands and your glands here. It's a whole sort of experience. And just to yuck it in a split bucket afterwards, I don't think you're getting the full experience.
Could you just run through actually how you're supposed to properly taste wine? What's the process?
Yeah, well,
it sounds like a full body affair.
Yeah, it's a full body experience. Which, if you go to Glastonbury, you know what I'm talking about. But essentially, so much about what we actually understand what taste is smell. 90% of it is the smell, but also the appearance of wine is so important. So first thing you want to do is you want to pour your wine into your glass, and you want to look at it. The best thing to do is look at it from a white piece of paper. because then you can see essentially the full sort of color of the wine. If it's brown, you know it's potentially quite old or it's completely gone off. If it's obviously hazy, it's gone off. If it's a light red, you'll know obviously what it's going to be. If it's a very bright purple, you know it's a young wine. If it's a white wine and it's very golden, you've seen a lot of aging. If it's, so you can denote all these sort of things just by looking at it. You should almost be able to know what the wine is going to be like just by looking at it. Then of course, you want to bring it to your nose and you want to smell the aroma and just keep going back at it. You really go crazy at it, because you can really go to town on the aroma of some really good wines. And then obviously you want to taste it. And the taste of wine, remember, is actually quite basic in a sense, because your taste buds can only taste a few basic senses: the sweetness, sourness, sorts of acidity, that sort of thing. And so it's about it's what we call a finish, which is how long the sort of taste of the wine lasts in your mouth. Sometimes you can have a glass and a glass of Pinot Grigio and it's just like goodbye at the end. I never tasted you to begin with. But then you have some really interesting wines that will last in your palate for ages. And yes, that's the process. So it's appearance, it's smell, and then obviously you taste it, and then you're trying to assess the kind of longevity of it. But equally, that's just when you're doing a tasting. Frankly, if you're just having some friends over and you want to have a bottle of red with your roast beef or something, go ahead. Yeah, that's the sort of, if you were to say a sort of a scientific way of tasting, that's the sort of way to do it.
You mentioned earlier the English wine of your supposed God's county or country.
Allegedly.
It seems to be something which has really come on the rise of recent years, and certainly probably in the last 20 years, that it seemed that anyone with a few acres and some spare cash started planting some vines and calling themselves a vineyard. How do you see from the industry the rise of English wines and challenging or coming alongside the supremacy of the continent?
I wish it was just a few spare cash. I mean, if you want to really go into a business and lose a lot of money quickly, it's go to an English vineyard, or go to just, if you think of most of the vineyards on the continent, they've been there for, a very long time. That initial cash investment happened sometimes 300 years ago. But if you're starting a vineyard, my goodness, it's just terrifying the amount of money that you have to put up front, and then you're losing money for 10 years until you actually start. A lot of vineyards, you often find a lot of English vineyards, they start making their own gin or their own brandy sort of thing initially, just to get some money in. But I mean, I would say that, and it is England, to be very clear, whilst I'm a fervent British individual, it is England that really is where English sparkling wine comes from. I frankly, they can't really grow much in Wales, and frankly, when you get a bit, when you get a bit beyond the wash, it's there's a few vineyards. Well, there's actually one in Yorkshire which is pretty good. But certainly English, in the south of England, English vineyards are proving themselves to be exceptional, and there's a reason for that. One, they frankly, unlike the French, who have an excellent name to go by, Champagne, they have to fight for their market. And it's very important to understand that English sparkling wine is made in the exact same style as Champagne, which is called méthode traditionnelle. And they often grow the exact same three grapes, Pinot Meunier, Pinot Noir, and Chardonnay. And they will go through the exact same process as Champagne. And like I said, they share the same, basically they share same soil and the same climate. So in all international tastings, they have proven to be excellent and have beaten a lot of particular house champagnes. I have quite a dim view of your standard non-vintage house champagne. That's branded, I mean.
So okay, so what is a house champagne?
It's the blend of the particular house, but when I'm talking about, what I'm basically talking about actually is branded champagne. branded non-vintage champagne. So you've got vintage and you've got non-vintage. Non-vintage is a blend of vintages from maybe 10, 15 years. And it's their, this is our sort of main wine. And vintage champagne is usually quite spectacular because it's had a lot of aging. It's from a particularly good vintage, and the flavor profile is completely different. And I mean, my general view is I think it's a complete waste of money to spaff 45 or 55 pounds on a bottle of Veuve Clicquot because it looks good, when you can have a Cremant or English sparkling wine that is cheaper. Although I said English sparkling wine is quite expensive now, but that's because it's quite a premium product. I think there's just so much more alternatives to champagne. If you're going to drink champagne, I think you should drink vintage champagne. That's my opinion. But we're all entitled to our own opinion. I've gone off on a bit of a tangent here about my hatred of brands in general, unfortunately. So sorry about that. But no, English to round your question, to finish in a perfect loop, your English sparkling wine is exceptional, and it's only getting more exceptional. And the French are doing reverse invasion. They are now buying lots of English plots of land in the same way that we used to own Bordeaux. Now they are trying to own the south of England. So I would suggest a rehash of the Battle of Agincourt to rescope this, because they are getting way ahead of us on this one. Because as climate change happens, Burgundy is getting a bit warmer, and it's becoming less seasonal, so more difficult in terms of its seasons. And as we've experienced from the summer we've just had, which has been amazing, whilst the wheat didn't grow in the fields very well, the grapes probably had a jolly good time. And so it'll be a really good vintage this year.
Have you ever, you mentioned Yorkshire being the furthest north that you could come to.
Never been.
Never been.
No, I'm joking.
I was at a dinner party in Lancashire, and the host thought he would try his hand at making some wines himself. So he created two. He called them Old Testament and New Testament. So the Old Testament, he crushed some grapes and then left it. And then the New Testament, he said he added a bit more science into it. So he put some different potions in, and then he served them up. And he served them up in 2 carafes, and he served everyone round. And I was first to be poured. I actually thought it tasted rather good. And then my wife Emily was the last to be poured, and she was at the end. And she said she had to really concentrate by not going blind. So when it comes to the whole process, and rudimentary though this chap Rob's winemaking could have been, what actually happens if you want to make your own wine? Which, of course, you can just go and buy some. But if you did want to make some wine, what would you go?
Interested. Did he grow his own grapes, or did he just buy some from?
He got them from his in-laws.
So, okay, fine. Okay.
So, it was a pretty organic process in his defense.
Yeah.
And there was not a modicum of seriousness about it. It was all
no. Why would there be?
Exactly.
As I said, it's fermented grape juice. So it depends what he means by sort of like science and all this sort of stuff. So you can have a situation where if you just bung a load of grapes in a barrel, you crush them up, the natural yeast on the actual skins itself will start a fermentation eventually, and it will develop into wine and all this lot. However, you can regulate these things a lot better with temperature, with certain types of yeast. There's, oh my goodness, if you really want to go down a rabbit hole, the amount of types of yeast there are. People, winemakers lose their, you have local yeasts and champagne yeasts and all these little special yeasts that people love to go down a little rabbit hole for. And I'm not a winemaker, there is definitely 2 sides of the wine industry. There's the more academic side, which I suppose I'm probably more in, and then there's the functional side, there's the farming side, there's the agricultural side, because let's actually be brutally honest, it's a very agricultural thing, winemaking. So he could have, like I said, done different temperature control, yeasts, but then you get a whole series of processes which completely change the style of your wine. You have a thing called maceration, which I always say, don't mispronounce it, whatever you do. I was macerating 10 times a day at university, that sort of thing. But it's very important that you maceration is when you steep the skins in the juice, and that can totally change the style of the wine because, of course, all that color bleeds out. You can have a thing called barrel aging, where you obviously put your wine in the barrel, and the process of mild oxidation as well as the flavoring of the wood changes the wine. I mean, there's a whole host of things. It's endless, absolutely endless. And but with his winemaking, I'll probably have to cop out on this one because I am not a winemaker for delivery. I'm actually trying to make my own cider at the moment. I have a few apple trees in Norfolk where my mum lives, and I'm trying to make my own cider. And it is just fermenting a load of slightly rotten apples in a massive vat, and hoping God will bless it in its own appropriate way. For that, I can answer no more than the various things you can do to make your wine more interesting. It's like how there's a whole host of wines. People have a complete warped perception with vintages, and one of the most frustrating things I have to deal with as someone who has an online website is customers and their innate stupidity about vintages. And it is the most irritating thing I can tell you on this planet. Which is, the other day I had someone complain. I've got like 5,000 wines on my website. I can't update them all. I had someone complain that they got a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, which said it was 2022, but now it's 2023. Now, anyone that knows anything or has a modicum of a brain cell knows that you want your New Zealand Sauvignon young and fresh, and you do not want an aged New Zealand Sauvignon. You wouldn't put it on your chips. It's just a ridiculous statement. And there's a few wines that, there's not actually a huge amount of wines out there that are good for aging. And so we have this complete warped perception that somehow that if we get a wine that's from 1995, it's going to be great. No, that's not true. It's quite likely it's going to be completely and utterly screwed. And people's perception of vintages is so warped. It's incredibly frustrating, and I'm essentially just venting out some of the idiotic things that I have customers say to me. And the problem is, because I'm my own boss, I in my turn rude back to them, which every now and again reveals itself in a very, very rude Trustpilot comment, which is completely my own fault. But I just, I worked in the, what's the word? What's the industry where you help serve people? What do you call it? Drinks industry.
Service industry, drinks
industry. Well, I worked in the service industry when I was 20, 21, and I got stupid, and one of the things that I'm a big believer in, everyone needs to do a form of national service, which is actually a form of waitering, because, you will never see me be rude to a waiter ever. I think people who are rude to waiters are lower than low. And so you have to deal with, the inane stupidity of some people. And now that I run my own business, I'm my own boss, I have zero tolerance for stupidity, which is probably not a good financial thing, and it definitely isn't. But I've very much become the Basil Fawlty of the wine world in terms of my absolute contempt for stupidity. And people, and people, and I don't mind people asking stupid questions. That's absolutely fine, because that's the only way we learn. But in terms of just things like whining about a vintage which didn't matter then and it doesn't matter now, I guess we're going.
Well, I'm glad we have accepted that there will be tolerance for stupid questions, because this will be a very this will be a very short podcast. If
endless tolerance for stupid questions. Yeah.
Okay, so the age thing. Talk to me about it. So if we use a comparison which a lot of people will know, whiskey, older, generally better and subsequently more expensive. Obviously it depends sometimes, but as a general rule, how does it work with wines?
So there are certain wines out there that just work very well with aging, and that's because of various things to do with acidity, as well as the climate and the grape itself. So Pinot Noir ages really well because it basically changes the style of what it's going to. Pinot Noir, when it's young, is very fresh. It's very fruit driven, but it's often quite high in acidity. Basically, what you're trying to do with aging wine, just so everyone knows, is both change two things. You're changing the kind of the nose profile, the sort of that profile of the wine, but helping also to reduce acidity sometimes. So, and also reduce the tannins. So in Bordeaux, a classic situation, particularly on the left bank, it's mostly Cabernet Sauvignon grown there. And actually, the great fascinating thing about Bordeaux is that the climate is actually not warm enough for the Cabernet Sauvignon to get to a certain ripeness. Excuse me. So what they need to do is, so they're quite tannin. They're very high in tannin, these wines, when they're young. So they need to age them because that softens the tannins. And then what it also does in the process, it also develops the flavor profile. So the best way to understand this is if you have a young wine, it's fruit driven. It smells of fruit, easy. The older you age it, that fruit gets sort of reduced, and you develop what we call secondary and tertiary flavors. So when you have wines that are described as like an old cigar box, or they get described as mushroomy or whatever, that's what we call secondary and tertiary flavors. So aromas. So the aromas change and the fruit is suppressed, and you have these that's why you have from aged like Riocas, they end up smelling these fantastic vanilla-y, cigar boxes, and and with Amarones, they end up being like dried dates and all this sort of wonderful stuff. So there are some wines out there that are excellent for aging, but the majority of wines you'll find in the supermarket today are ready to be drunk now, and they are, you don't really want to age them. It's as simple as that. And like I said, the perception of age as a guarantee of quality in anything is utter wank. And there are obviously, I would say it's the exception to the rule that just because it's older is better. It's and actually I would argue if you were to blind taste the majority of the British public with a kind of 1995 or Medoc, whatever, with a kind of, I don't know, a Cabernet Sauvignon from Australia, whatever, they're going to always prefer the younger, fresher, fuller-bodied wine. So yeah, that's the best way. And also, another bit I've not mentioned, which is what happens to white wine. What happens to white wine when you age it is really sexy. So there are certain wines out there, so grapes out there, like Riesling. New age Riesling. Riesling is fantastic for aging. It gets really golden. It gets really nutty, really complex. It's exquisite. But of course, when you age a New Zealand Sauvignon, like Mrs. Something was angry about, you're losing everything you want from it. You drink a New Zealand Sauvignon because it's young, it smells of tropical fruit, kiwis, woof, lovely. And if you age that for 2 years, all that fruit, goodbye, it's gone. So it's you're losing the main reason why you're buying the product in the first place. But people don't know this because why would they? So whilst I have complete contempt for her question, she's why would she know? But equally, I think I hit a cutoff with idiotic vintage questions. But apart from that, I'm all good. But I hope that's somewhat answered your question.
And when you say aging, is that you bought it and keep it in a bottle for a few years, or is that it's been aged before it was bottled?
It can mean anything, so it can mean both. But honestly, it can mean both. You have bottle aging and you have barrel aging, cellar aging. But yeah, that's why it's it's from the point of when it was as it were picked and turned into wine to the point where it is drunk. That period there, and different types of aging changes thing. You have different types of aging. I mean, like if you age something in a barrel, it would be completely different if you bottle age it. Bottle age it, if you think about it, particularly with a screw cap, it's almost completely. There's no chance of it getting into contact with almost any oxygen. And oxygen is often how you age wine. It's very small amounts of oxygen. It's why corks are sometimes better for aging, because cork is porous and it allows small molecules of oxygen to get in reacts with the wine, which slowly changes the murky compound and all these wonderful things. But if you were to put it in a screw cap, it preserves that freshness for a lot longer.
Okay, screw cap versus corked. what's happening there? Why are some different? Amongst amateur people, it might be a more advantageous route to go down the cork because it looks a bit fancier.
Yeah.
But does it actually have any advantages?
Well, it doesn't just look fancier, but also it has that poetic sound. You know, when you take it out, the majesty of that noise. You know, sounds like Friar Tuck, you know, opening a bottle of whiskey before he gets hammered or something like that. You know, it's a wonderful noise. But the reality, like I said, is it's so a screw cap will keep your wine for longer. The majority of why wines are tainted is because it's reacted badly with the cork. So if you are looking, you know, I think you could very much lodge him in the argument that basically all white wines, or certainly 95%, other than your Sauternes and a few things like that, and your Condrieu and things like that, should be screw cap, because it helps, because white wines are on the whole there to be drunk young, fresh, and have, you know, lots to be fruit driven. When it comes to cork, it works well with a lot of red wines. Because, like I said, red wines just generally often are better for aging in general. There is literally no right or wrong. I do think it's something a little bit mean, however. In Australia in particular, you have these wines at 100, 200 pounds, and you think, my God, it's a screw cap. But then they've developed now these really good screw caps where they look very sophisticated and all this sort of stuff. So they are getting there. Like, they're really beautiful looking, and so much about, you know, we fail to appreciate that everything is about, you know, from the start to wine to the drinking of it, it's about the appearance, it's about how, you know, it's about the, you know, how it looks, how it smells, how it tastes, you know, all the way from the bottle to the actual drinking it before it goes in the toilet later. You know, like, these are, you know, all these things matter. So there is no right or wrong. I would just, I of course, in a natural tradition, this by heart, prefer a cork, particularly if I'm, you know, it will be a sad day in hell when a Burgundy has a screw cap on it. I mean, I actually still remember this day. I sell a lot of Chablis, and I had my supplier converted his Chablis to screw cap, and I said, I'm sorry, I can't do this. I can't do this, mate. You know, this is beyond the pale now. And I get it, and the worst bit is it made sense to be screw cap, but I can't convince a member of His Majesty's Great British Public to buy a bottle of Chablis with a bloody screw cap for £25. you know, like, it's just, you know, mate, you don't understand your own market here. You know, So yeah, I cut off ties with that particular vineyard. He would not see sense. So yeah, it's a mix. It's a genuine mix in terms of what's right, what's wrong. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, which also what you like as well. If you don't give a hoo-ha, you're buying a £200 bottle of good Australian wine with a screw cap on, then that's totally up to you.
If one was to be invited to a garden party, there'll probably be like 3 levels of champagne on offer. There'll be the...
What sort of garden party are you going to? There's 3 different types of champagne.
No, not at a specific one, but depending on the garden party in which you're attending.
Oh, I see. Okay.
The champagne being served is either something that we found from a supermarket just off the shelf, terrific. If they wanted to signal maybe a bit of intent, you know, it might be a cheeky moët or something. And then if they wanted to really, I saw that. Here we go. This is what I want to get into. And then if they were particularly wanting to show off their artisan qualities, they might go for a Paul Rocher or something like that. I'd like to know what you think about those. But in that sense, is there actually any utility of those 3 levels of choosing one over the other, or should it just be choose whatever?
So I will initially retract your question, because I personally think that all those 3 things are the same thing. So I think that if you were to do a 3 sort of standard thing, you would.
Bearing in mind you're going to approach this from a technical point of view, mine was very much an amateurish. This is what I've seen, and this is what fellow amateurs do.
I'm trying to bring myself down to your humble level on it. So Paul Rocher and Moet Champion, I would say the same thing. They're just a branded champagne. Paul Rocher is a little bit more exciting, but I would add. I would say if you're going to do your 3 levels, I think you're looking to show off if you're going for like a branded champagne. I think if you're looking to show a bit of sophistication, you'll try. So this is not a plug. This is generally what I would do. For example, that you have your branded names, and then you have much more unknown champagne houses. And I do one called George Vasari, and it's a Grand Cru champagne. The vintage champagne, 2016 vintage of this Grand Cru is, I think, £41, the same price as a Moet Champion. And this is the difference is stark. I mean, it is honestly shocking. In terms of the flavor profile, the majesty of this bottle. I mean, I've deliberately actually ordered 2 bottles for my weekend because I've got a garden party I'm going. A dinner party I'm going to tomorrow. And it's just exceptional. So I would say that if you are, if I was going to do it, I would be okay. If you're just having some riffraff over some friends that you don't really care about, whether they're partners, then go for some Cremant or whatever. I would completely, absolutely move. I wouldn't even bother to waste my time on things like Moet Champion, Paul Rocher, Veuve Clicquot, because all it is, like I said, it's like with all brands. I do not wear brands. I do not do brands. Brands are just that. They are a status symbol to prove to who I don't know, to another bunch of losers, that you're also that you have money that you don't have. I mean, like, it's like I don't. I'm quite a tight ass. I don't believe in kind of showing off with these things. It's just about doing what's best. So I would completely and absolutely move away from any of these brands. Goodbye, the end. Thank you very much. Tata, very well. And I just go for Cremant, Cremant, which is a French sparkling wine that's made the exact same way as champagne or English sparkling wine. And then if you want to go a little bit more upmarket, go for some interesting vintage champagnes. You don't need to spend a huge amount of money. You don't need to do a sodding Veuve Clicquot 2011 or whatever. You can get exceptional stuff for around the £40 to £50 mark. That's, like I said, I sell one that is a Grand Cru 2016 vintage. I mean, exceptional. So that's what I would suggest. And get rid of your middle layer. Goodbye, and have your
why did you disdainfully waft off the suggestion of a Moet?
Well, it's just overpriced.
It's just because it's basically marketing that it's just this brand. It's just so different.
It's overpriced wank. Seriously, it is just marketing. It's style over substance, but not even that good a style. I'm probably showing you the contempt I have by not even answering.
Well, okay. Let's try and put it into a different industry in terms of a comparison.
Yeah.
Would it be like a Range Rover Evoque? It's got the Range Rover bag, but it's not really a Range Rover. And so the people who drive Range Rover Evoques are a bit.
And they're buying it and they're driving it in the city, and
would that be a fair enough comparison, or is it better or worse?
So I would almost actually go a little bit. I would change a little bit. So Rolls-Royce.
Okay.
Rolls-Royce have denied their own heritage, and the sort of person that buys a Rolls-Royce now is not the sort of person that would buy a Rolls-Royce in the 1970s. And in fact, you see this all around London. They are. All the brands are now starting to deny their own heritage, and brands now are being bought by 2 groups of people. This is going to sound very presumptive and potentially snobby, but it's not. People who often don't have the money, and who are trying to, they put a lot of that. I mean, I remember when I was young and I had no money, I'd buy a Ralph Lauren something and all this sort of stuff. And it's almost you almost can't explain why you do it. I mean, I actually can't explain why I did it. And then people who have loads of money, but no style, no taste. And they're the two groups, I would say. And it's the same with name champagne. You know, honestly, like, you're not, I mean, you might be impressing someone, and you know, if you want to do that, then you know, do what you like. I'm a very, very relaxed person when it comes to what people want to do. And surprisingly, I'm judgmental. Yeah, no, I just generally think it is just you are wasting your time and your money by emphasizing a branded, named champagne over like a sort of more interesting, unknown house champagne, which you'll get infinitely better, superior quality and everything. Frankly, it's as simple as that. And like I said, if you're having just a garden party and you want to just have some nice sparkles, enjoy yourself, get some Cremant, or get some English sparkling wine, or get some Carver, for heaven's sake. Carver's got such a bad reputation and is made the exact same style as champagne. You get one for about $8.99. It's madness. You know, it's the most undervalued, underappreciated sparkling wine out there. You know, so you know, it's about.
Dare I ask your thoughts on Prosecco then?
Well, so Prosecco and it's comparing apples and oranges. So Prosecco and like Cremant or champagne are completely two different things. One is made in what's called the tank method, which is large stainless steel tanks, and you essentially force carbonate it. You know, put a hose in the old girl. And then you've got the method traditional method, which is two fermentations. It's a two fermentation process where the sparkles, the bubbles, are literally created by the yeast dying in the bottle and creating carbon dioxide and all these other wonderful things. So they are two completely different things. And so I mean, I don't tend to drink Prosecco, not because of any innate snobbishness or anything like that, but just I prefer vintage champagne, and I prefer the kind of nutty complexity of that. And like I said, I don't drink wines that often. I don't drink that much of in general. So when I do, I want to drink something quite special. Prosecco is very young, it's very vibrant, it's very refreshing, and great. If you want that, then absolutely fantastic. You know, that's the style that you want. The style, like you said, that you might like is completely different to what I will like. We are different people with different taste buds, with different proclivities and all this sort of stuff. So you know, that's, you know, and thank God that is the case. Otherwise, everyone would be coming after my vintage champagne and ruining it for me, you know, and taking making it expensive and all this awful stuff. So that's fine.
Okay, so from the outrageous to the sensible, if we then look at storing our wine, you say don't store it in the kitchen. It's a terrible idea. Why is that?
Oh, terrible, terrible. Yeah. And everyone does it. Can I just say, including me? but that's because it never lasts long enough in my house. Because I say that not in an alcoholic way, in the sense of I'll only put things on my wine rack that, like classic example today, I've got some wine I was going out. But the delivery man won't come for another few days, so I just put it on my wine rack, you know, whatever. But if you're actually generally thinking of storing your wine, you want temperature consistency. You don't want temperature fluctuations. And what is the one room in your flat or house or whatever, or chateau, which is going to be more sort of fluctuating in temperature? It's your kitchen. It's the thing with the sodding oven on, which gets 220 degrees. You know, like that's what it is. So you don't want to store your wine there. You want to store your wine somewhere with consistency of temperature. You know, even if that temperature is slightly higher than what it should be, the consistency is what matters. So, that's what my general advice would be. But like I said, frankly, if you've got a wine that's worth aging, you shouldn't really have it in your house to begin with. You know, unless you've got a really sexy cellar, which is do that. But I live in a top floor flat in some Dickensian hovel, so I do not have a cellar. So yeah, but then I don't have any wines that I store really. I don't tend to do that.
And then just finally, I was out on my morning dog walks this morning, and I noticed that the trees are starting to sport their first autumn-looking leaves.
Oh,
as
it's depressing, isn't it? Yeah.
as we approach that time of the year. If we now are on our slow walk into Christmas, what?
It's the thought. I've enjoyed my summer so much. The thought of something going to Christmas, God, blow my brains out, honestly. But go on.
What would be the wine in which you would advise or suggest to people to pair with their Christmas dinner and turkey? Just the one, unfortunately. I guess you could give me a couple.
Well, the problem is I have goose because I'm a sane member of the humanity, and I think turkey is just a obese chicken. But if you want to have your obese chicken, so I would suggest if red wine, I'd suggest a nice light to medium red wine, sort of like a Burgundy, particularly if you're going to be having Christmas and you want to push the boat out a little bit. I tend to have with goose, I tend to have really aged Riesling because you have those wonderful nutty complex sort of flavors and aromas. So yeah, that's what I would generally suggest if you're going to have your turkey. Sort of nice, sort of interesting Burgundy, or like I said, I would go for a red wine on the lighter side. So light to medium. So like I said, Pinot Noir, Cabernet Franc. Maybe a Bordeaux, but ultimately that's just what I would do. And I know quite a lot of people would like a really full-bodied wine with their turkey, bleh, high alcohol, let's get shot there. So that's for and that's if that's people want to drink, then fine, enjoy it for God's sake. We're only on this earth for so long, so enjoy the time you've got.
And thus concludes an interesting, engageful, and insightful podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
I appreciate your grace in which you've extended to my amateurness, and I
appreciate the fact you said I have any grace at all. That's very appreciative.